Hello, this is Ellie Akra from Ellie's Angle, and today I have the privilege of being joined by a very special person in my life, Mr. Brian Lamb. If you don't know Brian Lamb, he is the founder of C-SPAN, founded in 1979. He's a legend in cable news and media. He's a Hoosier native from Lafayette, born and raised in Lafayette, Indiana, went to Purdue University, joined the Navy, and then went on to a number of jobs in DC, including the White House Office of Telecommunications Strategy. And something I learned today I didn't know about him, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I didn't know that, Brian. You really did that. That's amazing. And most importantly, though, above all these things, I'm just lucky to call Brian a friend. I've gotten to know him through Purdue, and he's an amazing man, an outstanding mentor, and just full of wisdom. So I'm excited to share a little bit of that wisdom with you all today. So thanks, Brian, for joining.
It's a pleasure, Ellie. Legends, sometimes are people that they're either dead or they're on their way out. So thanks for the compliment.
Well, I meant it as a compliment, but hopefully you take it that way. You are on your way out, though.
I am. It's time after 47 years to leave the premises, leave it to others, and others are ready to move ahead.
He will be missed. Brian will be missed for sure. I got to go on a DC trip at Purdue that Brian led. And everywhere we went, every place we toured, everyone knew who Brian was. So he's a pretty incredible guy, but he would never tell you that himself.
I hope not.
So, okay, Brian, I want to know the most important thing you've learned in your past, what was it, 47 years with C-SPAN that we, the public, need to know.
This is not a positive. The public doesn't listen. The public often makes up its mind and then is unwilling to listen to the statistics or the backup information or the research. There's only about 10% of the American people that are paying attention. The rest, it depends on what level, are in love with an image. They come out of a family that's on one political side and they keep staying on that side because they don't know any different. But it's so important to stop and think through what you really believe. Politicians are in the business of telling you what they believe and not really encouraging you to go find information on your own. I think that's more than anything I've learned over the last 47 years is no matter how hard we've tried here, when we listen to our callers every day, you just kind of shake your head and say, no, that's not, you're not hearing the right things. You've made up your mind and it doesn't matter what anybody says to you.
How do we start hearing the right things?
Start caring about it. I don't know that it'll ever change. Because people of your age are more fascinated by TikTok than they ever are from C-SPAN. And that's not a knock, it's just a fact. We've learned that, interestingly enough, because we've started putting short clips on TikTok. And there's nothing we've ever done that's appealed to young people like TikTok. And our numbers from TikTok are beyond anything I've ever seen. I think the last weekly report I saw is that we had 35 million hits from TikTok. We don't get that kind of numbers from anybody. So people your age are going to define in the future how to find information and what information matters. And you just hope that people begin to go beyond the headlines.
Using these different news sources and the scrutiny that comes on the mainstream media at times, how do we know what's true and not true?
$65 million question. You learn it by one of the things. Here's what I always thought C-SPAN would do is that people would stop long enough to hear a debate, Stop. And today, the way I live my life is that if I'm watching something, I have my iPad right with me. And if somebody says something about anything that I don't understand, I'll get on the iPad and look for it, usually through Google. Even Google is, you got to be careful because Google manipulates what you can see on a search. And they've just been found guilty by a judge here in Washington for antitrust violations. And that will be very interesting to see what happens because all of our big companies tend to monopolize. And that's one of the dangers is that people who are busy just living their life, they don't understand how they're being monopolized either by a Google or an Amazon or you name it, a Walmart. These are humongously large companies, and they tend to dictate what companies can sell their goods and all that stuff. So it's the same thing when it comes to information. You got to dig. You got to dig. I mean, I look at the Daily Caller every day, which is conservative, and the Daily Beast, which is liberal. I look at the Wall Street Journal every day and the New York Times. There are probably no better ways to see the contrast between ideologies. That if you put the Wall Street Journal editorial page on one side and the Times editorial page on the other, that's where the discussion could start for you. And then you can decide after you read a little bit of both sides what appeals to you.
Is there still room for civilized debate in our American society?
Most people every day have civilized debate in their lives. Most people aren't angry with each other. They aren't enraged with each other. I think a lot of the uncivilized debate is caused by politicians and media personalities. It's very much in the interest of a media personality to generate tension.
Mhm.
They do. That's what they do. These talk show hosts every day, they say, what are we going to say to rile up the audience? And the audience gets riled up and they pass it on and they call in and they're riled up. And the politician walks into the middle of a group, especially people that are on their side, and pumps them up and gets them excited. And we've been having a particularly harsh discussion of the issues in the last 10 years. It's been harsh all through our entire years as a country, but one human being has created in the system a very kind of it's a very negative environment, and it's name calling. And the other side decided we're going to get in that game too. So both sides are name calling. But I'll bet you when you get together with your friends and you know that they don't think like you do, you don't start yelling at them. It's just not the way we live on a normal basis, far away from the communication system we have.
So, how do you know? We talked about what's true and not true from the media, from politicians. Is there a way for us to know what's true and not true, regardless of political side?
On some issues, as we're going through this period right now and listening to the platforms for both parties, sometimes somebody says, if you spend money on this, this will happen. And it's anybody's call. But when somebody says, I just was responsible for 15 million jobs, and our current president says that, well, I've never bought a politician telling me that they are responsible for jobs, unless they've hired people in the government, and that's where a lot of the jobs are coming from, because this particular administration believes in government, unlike Republicans on the other side who would rather have less government, certainly less national government. And so you've got to just listen carefully. But what are they saying? You know, either side, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden telling me that they created these jobs, corporations created jobs, and they created jobs because the system was open and people wanted to buy things. But to have a politician tell me they've created a job, I find very difficult to accept.
One thing that you've told our class at Purdue frequently, is that DC is all about the money. Why do you say that?
Frankly, everything in life's about the money. And DC they actually don't have as much money as they spend, which is, for me, I'm an old man. If I were young, I'd be very upset about what the old people have done to me. It hasn't cratered yet, but at some point down the road, you can't be $35 trillion in debt without it having impact. And where directly it has an impact right now is that about a fourth of our budget that we spend every year is interest on the debt. Well, that's a real waste of money. I mean, that looms there, and you say, if you keep going this way, it's going to overwhelm the rest of the budget eventually. And I think in my lifetime, almost every generation of politician, all sides, has been terribly irresponsible about spending money. They don't care about it. Then now, if you've got a budget of $4 to $6 trillion, people can't get here fast enough in Washington to get a piece of that. And whatever it takes. And that's in itself a long story about what happens when all this money is available and people are chasing those dollars.
Is it too far gone, the national debt?
I don't know. I don't know. I must say I've been kind of a quiet voice in the wilderness. Don't see many people caring about the issue. I think they think it's going to be fine. But if you look at any chart, the manipulation by politicians over the years about money, Lyndon Johnson, and I got to be careful because I'm not an expert on this, but he moved Social Security from a budget standpoint into the general budget because he needed that money to show that he was trying to balance the budget because we were in the middle of the Vietnam War. Vietnam War, interestingly enough, and these figures don't equate, but we spent $100 billion on the Vietnam War. We spent probably $2 trillion on being in Afghanistan alone. And so we are not paying attention to how we spend our money. And nobody gets a pass on that. Nobody in this town gets a pass on the whole business of spending money we don't have.
Brian, as we talk about you're getting ready to head out of your office there at C-SPAN, I want to give you a moment to share the favorite story of yours that you have from these years you've spent there.
Favorite story. I'll tell you, this just popped into my head as you asked that question because it's as good a story as any. Back in 1982, probably before your parents met, we were on the air on the cable for 3 years at that stage. And we had a viewer by the name of Bud Harris. And Bud lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And Bud was an early caller to our call-in shows. And I was so impressed by him that I sought a way to talk to him off camera, privately. Because he was a big C-SPAN supporter. He always said the right things. And it wasn't politics he was talking about. It was basically the value of being able to see all this stuff. So we got to be friends. He watched every day. He and I would talk almost every day. And this was just a viewer. He was retired, 60. At the time when he retired, he was 60. He's now deceased, a long time ago. But we ran up against a cable operator that wasn't that great a supporter of ours. And we were switching channels on the satellite. That's how we would televise what we were doing to the whole country, by going from the here to the satellite and then into the cable system. And we came up to a point where we were going to change the channel. And I would tell the audience, be careful now because you might lose this. And I'd say, in a week, we're going to go to the new satellite channel and you may wake up that day and we're not on the system. And this was not a good company. They made a lot of money, but they weren't any good. And they didn't care about us. And so on the day before the satellite change, we went to the set here at C-SPAN and spent 8 hours out there with open phones, telling people, be aware that tomorrow when you wake up, we may not be on your cable system. About halfway through that day, Bud Harris called into the call-in show and he said, I'm William Bud Harris. I have started an organization called Friends of C-SPAN. And here's my telephone number. And if you need help with your cable system, call my number. Call me at home. And I will take your call and I will work on it. He did it and it worked. The next day, one company that I was talking about dropped us from 400 different cities in the United States. And frankly, didn't give a hoot. And so Bud Harris, and it's a long story, won't go into it, but he started the Friends of C-SPAN, and across the country, he talked people in these communities through how to get back C-SPAN back on the cable system. And that was such an incredible citizen-based thing. He didn't get $1 for that. He had no connection with anybody, with me or anything. He turned out to be a very good friend. I would go up and see him. And sadly, a number of years ago, he died. But what a great, I think I can say great American he was, because he believed so strongly in having the voices out there.
What does a strong America look like to you?
Well, to start with, is somebody that lives under the law without getting carried away with that. We have laws for a reason. And you must, in my opinion, if you're a great American or a good American or a good citizen, live under the laws. And that includes politicians. There are too many politicians, and we have examples from both sides where they have tried to fool the law. Some of them go to prison. And over the years, it's been okay, but there are probably a lot more that they could pin breaking the law on than they do. The system's very complicated. That's, I can sound like a politician by going on and on about what a great American is, but I would start with that. There are a lot of fabulous human beings in this country, and I would say most who believe in the law, but they're led often by people who don't. It's just strange.
Why did you do it? Why did you start C-SPAN?
Oh, I think more than anything, it was the experience of growing up in Lafayette, Indiana, and starting to realize, not scientifically or intellectually, that we weren't getting the full story. The media definitely had a point of view. And one thing led to another. I was not trained in any particular way to do what I do. I was not a business person. I didn't know the first thing about how to start a business. I leaned on some tremendous human beings who were in business, loved learning why they were in business and how they did what they did. And eventually the opening came, frankly, because technology changed. It's kind of like you right now doing what you're doing. You wouldn't be able to have done that when I was at Purdue or 10 years after I was at Purdue. This is all new because of technology, and it's terrific. There are a lot of voices being heard now that never, ever could have been heard before. And that's what motivated me. And it's been an interesting, fun career. It's not perfect by any means. People don't care about some of the things I do care about, and you have to get used to that too.
Do you have a life motto that you live by? Any quote or wisdom?
I don't have a quote or wisdom, I would say the thing that has, and I've been motivated by this ever since growing up in Lafayette. Ever since I loved older people. I loved talking to them. I spent lots and lots of hours with people that I respected in my neighborhood and my school. And the thing that popped out early in my life was the value of humility. That you're not nearly as important as you might think you are. And if you keep telling yourself that, life's a lot better. You might do good things, you might do great things, but I love watching the athletes. And I'm not sure this is the best example. It's one of the best examples right now. Is I love the way Caitlin Clark handles herself. She's not without pumping her chest and putting her hands up and being excited, but she's not a bragger, and she's not, and she shows some humility. So do a lot of. I mean, I've been watching a lot of her and her women colleagues in professional basketball and college basketball, and they're just terrific. It's fun. I just hope they can. Another one is Simone Biles. Love watching her attitude. There are a couple of documentaries right now about her on Netflix, and she's got a lot of spice, but she doesn't go around saying how great she is. And that's probably more than anything has been a tremendous motivator for me over the years.
Hey, well, if you want to come to a Fever game, let me know. We can do it. We can see Caitlin Clark in the flesh.
There's a Fever game here, the last game of the season for Fever, and I got on to look at the ticket prices, and they go from $89 to $7,200. Crazy.
Hey, when you retire, you may have that extra retirement money and you can go buy the best seats in the house.
I don't, I can see it pretty well on television, but it's just amazing to watch technology change. And because of technology, so much else is getting better.
Well, Brian, you are truly an inspiration to me, and you live what you say, and your actions follow your words. So that's something that I respect and is a lost art sometimes in our world. So I just appreciate you being you and all that you've done for not only our government and media, but also Americans in general. So appreciate you and thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
I only wish I was going to be around long enough to see you get to the pinnacle of your professionalism. It would be fun. Thank you, Ellie.